NFL. I mean, it's going to be the final week of the season. We'll talk about some of the things we saw yesterday and what we think is going to happen. Um, what do you think about that Baltimore game there, Jamel?
Hey, Baltimore been putting up a clinic on people lately. That's all I can say is like an outhouse or something,
I
slaughterhouse.
know, and I did that video last week. Don't know if anybody knows, but we got hacked a couple of weeks ago, so we kind of went off the air for a minute to deal with a few problems. But we plan on going back on real strong, um, and get that taken care of. But I did that MVP video a couple of weeks ago or last week, and I said Lamar Jackson was the favorite. I thought Tua had a chance to become MVP if he could go to Baltimore and beat them. And they looked good the first couple of series, the beginning of that game. I mean, that speed was killing down, up and down the field. I mean, they were moving. And then all of a sudden, and I kind of like walked away from the game because I had something to go do. But I was thinking to myself, it was going to be a close one. But dang, and then Baltimore, what they scored 56 points, you know,
Yeah, something like
and
that.
I think part of it was they wanted to, because they were solidifying their 3 seed. But I think a little bit of it could have been that people were talking about other people for MVP and stuff like that. I think this was a statement game, if nothing else. This was a statement game. Um, because and Lamar Jackson, everybody wants to say that the MVP's a quarterback award. And I do agree with that pretty much because, I mean, it's mostly been quarterbacks. Um, but everybody says Lamar Jackson don't have the offensive stats that the other quarterbacks do. Because like Tua is leading the league, I think, in yards and touchdowns. Um, but if you look at Lamar Jackson's stats, to me they're a little deceiving, is because like the last 5 or 6 games, he's averaged almost 300 yards a game, and he's throwing up um, good TD numbers and stuff like that. So to me, what is the MVP? What do you What's the definition of MVP, Jamel? What do you think?
Uh, the value, like the value of that player to that specific team, I
Yeah,
would
and
say.
that's it.
Like it doesn't have to be like the necessarily. It can be necessarily the best player because that's kind of like apples to oranges in a way. Like who's the
Right.
best player in the NFL or any
Mm-hmm.
league that year? But to me, and it don't necessarily always work out that
Mm-hmm.
way. It's like what does that player mean to that team, and also they definitely have a good record. Like,
Yeah,
but
and the Harbaugh, John Harbaugh, he's always had a well coached team. And they're one of those teams that's always kind of there. Even when they're having a down year, I mean, they're kind of like sneaking in the playoffs at the end or in the hunt big time. I mean, they're always right there. I mean, he's never had really a down year in my mind. But, um, and I think the MVP also, because, the last few weeks, people were talking Brock Purdy, people were talking Tua, and I came up with that video and said Lamar Jackson, everybody, and a lot of people were saying it. But what you do those last 5 or 6 weeks when the games really matter and they count, and I think Baltimore and Lamar Jackson just checked all the boxes. Because I mean, Purdy, to me, I mean, he got. I'm going to say, they talk about how good of a coach the San Francisco coach is. But he got out coached the first half for that game with Baltimore because they were
oh yeah,
anticipating what the game plan was. I mean, you have to give people something different. I mean, as you can sit there and you can go all season, you're running your script and all that, and Everybody's saying woo woo, they're so good, and then you start getting to those last few games where they really matter to everybody on the field, and they're game planning for you, right? I mean, that coach got out coached. I mean, you got one of the best running backs in the league, if not the best, and there's been a few little talks about him for MVP. But I mean, they got out coached. And then Brock Purdy, and everybody was saying, well, he looked good in the second half. Everybody always looks good when they're trying to come back, right? I mean, they're going to
Yeah.
score some and stuff, but that game was already decided. I mean, not only did San Francisco get out coached defensively, but they got out coached offensively because they were double covering Lamar Jackson with a spy running around too. They wasn't rushing. They were scared to rush Lamar Jackson. And you got all that contract money, all them people. I'm sorry. I think the NFL or any sport, you got to force your will on them. You agree with that? I mean,
I agree.
if you think you're that good and all that stuff, you can't modify your game plan to where you're almost like scared of somebody. I mean, and I thought San Francisco was scared of them. So, Baltimore, you think they're a Super Bowl team?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely.
Well, let's go.
AFC is I was about to say that AFC not really as good as it's been the last few
Right.
years, but yeah, they definitely at
All
the
right.
top
So
though.
let's talk about who we got in the AFC. We got your division winners. Who do we get? We got Kansas City. What do you think about? I thought Kansas City the other day looked like they was actually an offense was starting to wake up a little bit.
Yeah,
Um, what do you think about Kansas City? You think Kansas City has a chance to repeat?
looking really slim. Looking chances are looking they don't look as good. And it's kind of weird because like that team and Philadelphia, they're kind of like in that same kind of boat, trying to get things
Right.
figured out. It seems like they're kind of
Mm-hmm.
reeling, and you should be rolling around this time. You should be in high
Right.
gear around this time when
Mm-hmm.
playoffs are coming up. So,
Right.
uh, yeah, I'm not too keen on Kansas City
Right.
this year.
In that Kansas City, they've been double teaming Travis Kelsey um, all year. And I think he has a little injury. He's not quite right to me. Um, and you might can beat them double teams and stuff when you're good and healthy, but he's not healthy enough right now to beat them. And in the receiving core, they haven't been good enough to stop them
Yeah,
from double teaming him.
they're first in the league in
Yeah,
drops and drop
and
passes.
and I think that's one of the key to Travis Kelsey because you think about that offense, and if he don't have a good game this coming week, it's going to be like the first year in his career. He's not going to have 1,000-yard season. I think he's at 900 and something. I'm not sure if he'll even play this weekend, but you think about a tight end success. I think it's a lot built on how good that receiving core is because you think Tyreek Hill was there, and I can't think of all the other receivers they've had the last few years. But you had somebody,
Yeah,
yeah,
Sammy
but you
Watkins.
had somebody over the top that had to be double teamed, and and then all of a sudden here's the tight end running down the field free. So I think their receiving core this year has really hurt Travis Kelsey. And what most people's decided to do, they're single covering everybody and they're double teaming Travis Kelsey. So they're kind of like, they're just not scared of him. So, and that's clogging up everything. They just ain't got the receivers. You have to double team. So, and then they double team Kelsey. So, Patrick Mahomes had nowhere to go. I mean,
Yeah.
But I think that defense is good enough that they've had close games, that they probably could have won a few more games if, like you said, they didn't have all them drop passes and everything, because they've had opportunities. They should have won. I think they should have only about 4 losses. So, but I won't agree with you. I'm not that high on Kansas City this year. I don't think they're a Super Bowl team. Okay. So, what's our other divisions? We got Baltimore, we got Kansas City, and who else we got? Miami. What do you think about Miami? Do you think
Yeah.
Miami is all that?
Potential wise, yes. I think the on paper everything looks good, but that doesn't necessarily translate to the field all the time. So until they show it, uh, everything you'll leave a lot of unanswered questions. I feel like.
Well, and Miami, I've liked Miami all year, and um, I think they have a great offense. They got Tyreek Hill. I think, and I think that hurt his feelings, that he got hurt there the last couple of weeks, so he wasn't able to get that 2,000-yard season. But I just don't think that defense is physical enough. Now, I think they've led the league in sacks like the last 8 weeks of the season, and but And in that type of team, you got a team that scores a lot. You got to have somebody to rush. You got to get sacks. But I just don't think Miami is ready for prime time physically. You kind of agree with that?
I would agree
Yeah,
with
they,
that.
they just ain't got the physicalness yet. They need a dog on that defense that it's just going to terrorize you. That's what they need. As a team, they've been getting the stats on sacks and stuff. But when you got such a big lead, which they've had a lead in a bunch of games, that offense is totally passing. So your sacks are going to go up. That's just even, but and all you're doing is keeping them from catching up. You're not imposing your will on offense, and I just think that's what they're lacking. Because once Baltimore got off yesterday, there wasn't nothing they could do with them. I mean, nothing to stop it. I thought they was going to go for 70, to be like they, so they feel like the Broncos or something. But yeah, that was crazy. Okay, so we got Miami, we got Kansas City, we got Baltimore. Who's our other division leader?
Mm, I know the Texans. I think the Texans lead the AFC South, if I'm not mistaken.
The Texans. I
Yeah.
know, and their quarterbacks came back, right? Because I saw he
Yeah.
played the other day, and they won pretty convincingly the other day with him back. Stout, I think's one of the futures of this league as far as the quarterback goes. But I think the Texans. Do you think they're a Super Bowl team?
No.
You don't
No.
think so?
Yeah, they a few years away.
Mm-hmm.
But they definitely a great start. Definitely a great start to head in the
Yeah, I
right
think they're
direction.
on their way up. So, and Stout, he's proven a lot of things, but he hasn't proved things to me in a big game yet. Um, because when you get in the playoffs, the levels can go up and stuff like that. Well, now let's talk about who the scary people in AFC, that's not going to win the division. It could be looming. Buffalo. Buffalo had a terrible start to the season. I know we had them in our top 5 early in the year, and then they fell out of the top 5. And then a lot of people put them back in
Yeah.
the top 5. They think they're one of the better teams. But I still, Bill Parcells says something. You are what your record is, and I think that rings true 90% of the time. And that's why some people said Josh Allen for MVP, but I can't say you're MVP if you're fighting for a playoff spot. I just don't think that is what makes the MVP. Um, but I mean, and I thought that was going to be the team everybody's going to worry about. It was going to come out of nowhere, get a wild card, and be the dangerous team. You think they're the one?
Um,
And
I would I would
we're
say
saying the
no.
AFC,
I,
not the NFC.
yeah, yeah. As far as the AFC, I don't think they can beat Baltimore. I don't think they can beat Cleveland. Really, I don't even think they can beat
And
Cleveland.
we'll segue in it. Now that you said Cleveland, see, to me, Cleveland is a scary team. They got the best defense in the league. They got a quarterback that ain't making no mistakes. He's got a lot of experience. And if Brock Purdy wants to learn how to throw a ball, he should go to the Joe Flacco school because Joe Flacco is a lot better. He understands the game. The other day in the game, he falls asleep on the bench. He didn't throw for 300 yards the second half.
That's an old man right there, man. Getting a
I
little
mean,
old now. There, you
well,
ready to go
what
home?
you think? You might can call him old, but don't call me old till you can stop me or beat me. Okay? That's what I always say. I mean, that's what I live by. Don't call me old till you can match my game. Then you can call me old. Until then, shut up. But Joe Flacco's a no mistake quarterback. They got great defense. I know there are running backs out, but their other running backs seem like they're filling in the gaps. Um, to me, that's a scary team. I mean,
It is.
and because to me, Buffalo, you know, Josh Allen always seems to go back to himself. He'll throw that interception. He'll make that mistake in a big game, and it cost him. And I just don't trust. I trust Joe Flacco more than I trust Josh Allen. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I feel like
Yeah.
that's fair
Yeah.
assessment.
So, all right. So we've talked about the AFC. Let's go to NFC. Who's our number one seed? San Francisco. Do you think they're the clear favorite to go to the Super Bowl?
Yeah, I had to say yes. As far as the eye test, like what I've seen, seeing them against the other top
Right.
teams in the NFC, I would have to
Right.
agree.
And I still ain't sold on Brock Purdy. I mean, he can't play from behind, because they lost 3 games kind of like mid-season, I think it was. And they would get behind, and Brock Purdy just wasn't a quarterback to bring them back. Um, I just, I just, and I ain't saying he's not going to be a good quarterback in the league and stuff like that, but he just ain't got the toughness. There's a certain toughness to me. And I think they didn't win too convincingly the other day, and they lost at Baltimore. So the last couple of weeks, that team's been a little questionable to me. Because, one thing I always think too, it's hard, if you could buy a championship, Jerry Jones done won every year. If you could buy a championship, Mark Cuban would have won an NBA every year. But I don't believe if you've got that many good people that are, and I never did, I wanted to do a podcast on just the San Francisco 49ers, all the salaries are on that team and everybody's on that team. But you got to have some worker bees. You can't have all stars because they will think somebody else made a mistake is why they're winning. It's hard for them to be self-reflective. I think the chemistry ain't the same when you got that many stars on it. What do you think about that assessment right there?
It's definitely it can be an issue. I think that's where coaching, pretty much where coaching kind of
Right.
shines in areas like that when you got a lot of egos, a lot of alpha guys that think they're, at the
Right.
top. They all got different
Mm,
opinions, but I think it's kind of like a hand in hand thing. You kind of got to throw that ego to the side, and as far as coaching, you got to bring them all
right.
together in order for
Right.
it to work. That's the only scenario when it can really
And do
work.
you think their coach is that type of coach, though? I mean,
I
you
would
think
say
so?
yes.
I,
Shanahan, always been
yeah, and I know
around.
he's great at X's and O's and stuff like that. But I mean, like if you had somebody, I mean, who's the guy at Denver that came from New Orleans? What's his name? Peyton. Yeah, if you had like
Sean
a
Payton.
Sean Payton, I mean, he, I mean, to me that's a different type of coach because I remember Kyle Shanahan's dad. I pretty much seen his whole career, and he was always a good coach, but he was never that "Ugh," type of coach. And I hope Kyle Shanahan don't get into that. I mean, because it's not all about X's and O's, right? You got to you got to have a
Yeah.
culture of toughness, and now I'm sitting there. I'm gonna say impose your will again. I've been saying that all day, but his dad was kind of the same. I mean, he was a great coach. He knew the football. I mean, but you take somebody like Antonio Pierce and the Raiders. I don't think he's built. I mean, Antonio Pierce, they'll run through a wall for him. Especially, I think last week they lost, but up until that point, they're ready to run through a wall for that man. And I think it'd be a shame if they don't make him the coach in the future to give him a chance. Um, but I don't know. To me, San Francisco's been a lot of skill, blah, 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 but I don't know if they got the toughness. I know they got some great defensive players. You definitely don't want to be rushing you and stuff like that. But, look, I mean, they wouldn't even rush against Lamar Jackson. I mean,
Hey, that's a scary Lamar Jackson. That's a
yeah,
scary sight to see though. He get
yeah,
the
but I
running,
mean, but you got to hit somebody in the mouth. I mean, I mean,
but
I would have kind of, especially. I mean, I guarantee you, if and they fell behind early, right in that game, pretty much. Um,
yeah,
I would have uncorked that defense second half. I wouldn't care if they scored 56 points, but Lamar Jackson would have been hit. Everybody would have known we were there. I mean, I mean, I just, I mean, that game against Baltimore just told me something that, for one thing, maybe Kyle Shanahan's not as good as everybody thinks he is because he got outcoached on both sides of the ball. And two, how tough is this team? Now, they might prove me wrong. I might be a little bit too harsh and I might be getting harsh, but it's a wait to see to me. Okay, so the other division leader, we got the Cowboys. How about them Cowboys? What you think about them?
hey, every year like you said, every year they supposed to be in the Super Bowl.
Yeah,
For what I've been hearing for the past 5
right.
years, but like I said, until they gonna have to show me something. They gonna Dak's playing a little better. CD having he's pretty much emerged as that clear number one
Oh
guy.
yeah,
A lot of
oh
people
yeah. A
had
lot of people
questions
had
about
questions if he
him,
was the number one
but
receiver.
I think all those questions are
Yeah,
gone now
I
as
agree.
far as him as a number one.
And it might not manifest this year, but I think the Cowboys are turning a corner. For one thing, Dak Prescott, because they went to that West Coast offense once McCarthy started calling the plays and stuff, 3-step drops, get rid of the ball, and that's been great for him. I mean, his interceptions are way down and all that stuff. But and their defense, um, they've got Micah Parsons and what's that other um, real good defensive player that's been getting sacks and been playing well. I can't think of his name. But he's really good. But Micah Parsons seems like in big games, he's not getting at big times. He's not getting to the quarterback. Now you can fill up a stat sheet, but when it comes to crunch time, is he doing what he needs to be doing? Like I'll give you an example. You watched the Kansas City game yesterday? Any of that?
Yeah, bits and
Well, if
pieces.
you'd have
I
watched the
did.
end, when Cincinnati was trying to get in a position to score again, I mean, people were coming from everywhere. I mean, after that quarterback, I mean, they were rushing like crazy. I mean, they were making it into the backfield, sacking. And, a lot of times you don't always get the sack, but I expect you to miss it by a couple of seconds. You got to get back there. But that's one thing I noticed on that defense. And who's the defensive coordinator of Kansas City? Can't think of his name. He's been around forever, really good. But I mean, that defense, when they cut them loose in the fourth quarter, when Cincinnati was trying to come back or trying to score, I mean, they were everywhere. They were sacking him like crazy. And that's what I don't see out of Dallas. I mean, they're great for three quarters or great normally, but then when it comes crunch time, I mean, what do you do to stop? And I think this is just Micah Parsons to me. I just don't think during crunch time he's there. Now, I did say Dallas is turning a corner, and I'll tell you why I think that. And like I said, I don't know if it'll manifest this year. But you notice the last couple of games, Detroit and Miami, it was like a 2 or 3 point game, 20 points scored, and that's the type of games you gotta learn how to win. Now they lost the Miami game, but they were right there. They lost by a field goal to end, and then they beat Detroit. So it was a low scoring. It was close. To me, that tells me their character's changing. That they're becoming, because I mean it's easy when you got 40 points on the board, to look great. But the NFL, all these big games, they're not decided like that. It's 2 or 3 points, right?
Mhm.
So what do you think about that? Do you think they're turning a corner? And I'm not saying they're going to be the Super Bowl team this year, but how do you feel about that?
Uh, I don't know. That's kind of that's a good question
Mm-hmm.
though, because against the 49ers they got beat by like 30, I think. But at the same, and then I think they beat on Philadelphia pretty good. But I feel like that one team that they're looking at is the
Yeah.
49ers. Like they're kind of keying in on them, and I just think that's that mountain they got to
Mm-hmm.
climb, and you pretty much just got to wait and
Yeah.
see.
And I think that 49ers game taught them a lesson, because they haven't really been beat like that since then. When they played Philadelphia in Philadelphia, they played close and just, a play or two, and they could have won that game. And then they beat Philadelphia pretty good when they came here. Um, they really needed that Miami win, but then Philadelphia. I mean, what has happened to Philadelphia? They've lost 4 of their last 5. What is happening there? What do you think?
Defensively, not not looking as good as they did last year. Offensively, seems like some pretty horrible play calling. I mean, AJ Brown, he's voiced his displeasure
Mm-hmm.
with how the offense is being
Right.
how the offense is being ran. But just overall, they're just not playing good football. It's just not a good brand of football they're playing.
Right. And I'm going to agree with that. And one thing about, I mean, their backing under defense is terrible. And you noticed in the Arizona game, I mean, they were up 21-6, but when they started passing and coming back after them, they couldn't stop Arizona. Now, granted, Kyler Murray's a little bit better than the other quarterbacks Arizona had earlier in the year. I mean, but Philadelphia just couldn't stop the onslaught, and then they end up losing 35-31. I mean, so it don't seem like they can stop anybody in the passing game. And, I just don't, and I told you early in the year, I felt like there were some problems with Philadelphia, that they just didn't seem like the same team, and I think the players start feeling that. When you're a great team, which I think they were a great team the last couple of years, and they're a good team this year. Don't let me totally badmouth them. But I mean, you can be 10-2, and everybody in the locker room that knows football is saying to themselves, "We're not playing our best football." You ever hear that term? I mean,
Yeah.
and I think that's Philadelphia. They're just not playing their best football. I mean, their defense can't stop nobody, and late in the game when they start passing a lot, and Jalen Hurts, I think he's got like 36 touchdowns this year. I think he's set another record for the Philadelphia Eagles and stuff. So I don't think it's him, but I mean the play calling and stuff. As a quarterback, maybe he needs a little bit more control on his plays. They said he, had play calling duties for a couple of games and it didn't go well in their mind. But I don't know. That's an interesting situation there. I don't know what's happening for them, but they've lost 4 of their last 5. Now they're probably going to lose the division to the Cowboys. So they're going to be a wild card team. Yeah, I just don't know what's happening there. I don't have an explanation for that one, except for they can't stop nobody.